Every species surrendered to them, except the Deathworlders called humans. If you are not a heretic, then declare your city of origin. Leave a comment, a like, and subscribe to the Emperor's Glory. At the conclusion, rate this tale from 0 to 10. The Emperor protects. The plasma fire cut through the Vesperian's chitinous armor like paper, and Captain Zyx 41 watched another of his soldiers fall. The reptilian hegemony had been methodical in their conquest. 7 systems in 3 months, each one falling with surgical precision. No survivors, no mercy, no hope. "Sir, they're advancing on the North Ridge," reported Lieutenant Kess, her feline ears flattened against her skull in terror. The golden fur along her arms stood on end as another barrage shook their makeshift bunker. "We've lost contact with the Tau firebase. The Bovarian heavy weapons team, they're gone, sir." Zy 41's compound eyes tracked the battlefield through his scope. The hegemony forces moved like death itself, cold, calculated, unstoppable. Their scaled forms seemed to absorb light, making them blend with shadows. Perfect killers from a perfect war machine. "How many do we have left?" he asked, though desperate he dreaded the answer. 43 mixed species, sir. Canine pack hunters, some Eldar rangers, a few Kroot, and... Kess hesitated, her whiskers twitching nervously. "And what, Lieutenant?" "The humans, sir. 5 of them. They're surprised. They're singing. Singing? In the middle of a massacre?" Zy 41 had heard stories about the humans from the distant Imperium, violent fanatics who worshipped some ancient emperor. Deathworlders from a planet so hostile that merely surviving there was considered miraculous by galactic standards. But seeing them in person was different. Disturbing. The first one he'd met introduced himself as Brother Sergeant Thaddeus, a giant in blue power armor that hummed with barely contained energy. The man stood nearly 3 meters tall, his gene-enhanced frame making even the largest Bovarian look small. When Zyx 41 had asked about his homeworld, Thaddeus had simply said, "Terra is paradise compared to where we fought, Xeno." The way he said Xeno wasn't entirely hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. It was matter-of-fact, like calling water wet. A massive explosion rocked their position, sending debris raining down. Through the smoke, Zyx 41 could see the hegemony's warforms advancing, 12-foot-tall reptilian monstrosities with integrated plasma cannons and molecular-edge claws. Behind them marched thousands of their soldier caste, moving in perfect synchronization. "Sir, we need to fall back to the secondary line," urged Kess. "The Eldar are already retreating. They say the position is untenable." That's when the singing got louder. Through the acrid smoke and screaming wind, a human voice rose in what could only be described as a hymn. Deep, resonant, absolutely fearless. Other voices joined it, 5 humans singing in perfect harmony while plasma fire lit up the sky around them. "What are they singing about?" Zyx 41 asked. Kess's translator unit crackled. "Something about holy fire? And an emperor? Sir, they're not falling back. They're advancing." The Vesperian captain felt his stomach sink. Humans were notoriously unpredictable, but advancing into certain death seemed insane even for them. Through his scope, he watched the 5 blue-armored figures stride forward through the killing field like they were taking a casual walk. Brother Sergeant Thaddeus raised what the humans called a bolter, a weapon that fired self-propelled explosive rounds the size of grenades. The sound it made was like thunder, and where it hit, hegemony soldiers simply ceased to exist. "Purge the Xenos filth!" Thaddeus roared, his voice somehow carrying over the battlefield cacophony. "For the Emperor!" The other humans took up the cry, "For the Emperor!" A hegemony warform turned its plasma cannon on the advancing humans, unleashing enough energy to melt through a tank. The beam struck Thaddeus center mass, and he kept walking. His armor's energy field flickered but held, and he responded by putting 3 bolter rounds through the creature's torso. "Impossible," breathed Kess. "No infantry can survive that kind of firepower." "The Emperor protects, little cat," said a calm voice behind them. Zix-41 spun around to find another human. This one had apparently approached their position without being detected. The figure wore similar blue armor but carried different markings. His helmet was mag-clamped to his belt, revealing a scarred human face with pale eyes that seemed to look right through you. "Apothecary Cassius," the human introduced himself with a slight nod. "You are injured, Xeno, your left arm." Zix-41 looked down. He hadn't even noticed the plasma burn scoring his carapace. "It's not serious. It will become infected within 6 hours. The hegemony coats their weapons with necrotizing bacteria." Cassius was already opening some kind of medical kit. "Hold still." The treatment hurt more than the original wound, but within seconds, Zix-41 felt the burning sensation fade. Whatever the human had used was incredibly advanced, or at least incredibly effective. "Why aren't you with your battle brothers?" Zix-41 asked. Cassius looked at him with those unsettling pale eyes. "Someone needs to keep you alive, Xeno. The sergeant has grown fond of your warriors. He called you adequate allies. High praise from an ultramarine." Another massive explosion shook the ground. Through the smoke, they could see Thaddeus and his squad had somehow carved their way 50 meters into the hegemony line. Bodies, or parts of bodies, were scattered in their wake like grotesque confetti. "How?" Kess whispered. "How are they doing this?" Cassius began cleaning his medical equipment with methodical precision. "We are Adeptus Astartes. We know no fear. We know no doubt. We serve the Emperor's will, and his will is that these Xenos die screaming." The casual way he said it sent fearful chills through Zuck-41's exoskeleton. The human wasn't boasting or threatening, he was simply stating facts. "But tactically speaking," Zik-41 began, "your tactics assume survival matters more than victory," Cassius interrupted. "This is why you lose." A hegemony aircraft screamed overhead, strafing the battlefield with plasma fire. One of the human warriors, Brother Maximus, if Zik-41 remembered correctly, actually, surprised, jumped up and grabbed the aircraft's landing gear as it passed. The pilot tried to shake him off, but Maximus simply planted a grenade against the cockpit and dropped back to the ground. The explosion lit up the battlefield. "Your warriors are insane," Zik-41 said flatly. Cassius considered this seriously. "Perhaps, but we are insane in the service of the Emperor. That makes all the difference." The hegemony line was wavering now. Not retreating, their reptilian discipline wouldn't allow that, but definitely disrupted. 5 humans had carved a wedge through what should have been an impregnable formation, and the psychological effect was spreading. "Sir," Kess reported, her voice filled with disbelief, "the Eldar they're asking if they should advance. They want to know how the humans are still alive." Through his scope, Zix-41 watched Brother Sergeant Thaddeus decapitate a hegemony warform with what appeared to be a powered sword. The massive reptilian's head spun through the air, and Thaddeus was already turning toward his next target. "Tell the Eldar to advance," Zix-41 decided. "All units, advance. Confident, follow the humans." "Sir, that's—" "Follow the humans, Lieutenant. I have a feeling they know something we don't." As his mixed-species force began their advance, Zix-41 found himself wondering what kind of world could produce warriors like these. What kind of hell planet forged beings who treated certain death as merely another obstacle to overcome? He was about to find out that Terra was actually considered one of the safer worlds in human space. The briefing chamber fell silent as Commander Thax finished translating the human tactical proposal. Around the curved table, representatives from 7 species stared at the holographic display showing the human plan of attack. "Let me understand this correctly," spoke Elder Caithara, her crystalline wings shimmering with disbelief. "The humans suggest charging directly into the Devourer's primary nest cluster with no shields, no orbital support, and minimal ammunition reserves?" Captain Rodriguez leaned back in his massive armor, the ceramite plates grinding softly. "See, that's the plan. We call it the Emperor's Own Special Delivery." The Katani military advisor, General Vex, his feline features contorted in confusion, gestured at the hologram. "Captain, our analysis shows this approach has a 97.3% casualty projection. For any sane military force, this would be suicide." "Suicide?" Rodriguez's helmet vox crackled with what might have been amusement. "Hermano, suicide is when you don't want to die. This is called Tuesday." Dr. Helix, the Serpentari chief strategist, slithered closer to examine the tactical display. His cold, reptilian eyes calculated rapidly. "The Devourers have consumed 17 sectors. Their adaptation rate exceeds all known biological parameters. Even if you survive initial contact, they will evolve countermeasures within hours." "That's why we go fast and loud," Rodriguez replied, tapping his bolt pistol. "Can't adapt to faith, Xenos." The assembled aliens exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. Universal recognition of insanity. Captain Zara of the Lupine Fleet Marines stepped forward, her canine features earnest with concern. "Captain Rodriguez, my pack has fought beside many species. We understand pack loyalty, but this plan requires your soldiers to advance into certain death. How do you maintain unit cohesion under such circumstances?" "Easy. We shoot anyone who retreats." Rodriguez's matter-of-fact tone sent disgusted ripples of shock through the chamber. "You execute your own soldiers?" Commander Thax's tentacles writhed with disgust. "Only the cowards. The Emperor protects the faithful." Elder Caithara's voice rose to a crystalline chime of incredulity. "And your soldiers accept this?" "They volunteer for it," said a new voice from the entrance. All heads turned as Sister Superior Magdalena entered, her power armor gleaming with sacred oils and purity seals. "Forgiveness of cowardice is heresy. Death in his service is glory." The aliens stared at the female warrior whose armor bore scorch marks and battle damage that would have felled 3 normal soldiers. Her flamer unit hummed with barely contained promethium flames. "Sister," Rodriguez nodded respectfully, "how goes the reconnaissance?" "The Devourers have established 17 primary nest clusters across the continental mass. Estimated biomass consumption rate suggests total planetary strip mining within 72 hours. Magdalena's voice carried the cold certainty of absolute faith. General Vex's tail lashed anxiously. 72 hours? That's impossible! Our projections showed at least 2 weeks before. Your projections assumed normal consumption patterns, Magdalena interrupted. The Devourers aren't normal. They're learning, adapting, growing stronger with every world they consume. Dr. Helix coiled tighter, his forked tongue tasting the air. Then conventional tactics are useless. We need new strategies, adaptive protocols. We need fire and faith, Magdalena stated flatly. I've seen what lies in those nests, horrors that would break Xeno's minds. But the Emperor's light burns away all darkness. Captain Zara's pack instincts were screaming warnings, but military discipline kept her voice steady. Sister, with respect, even the most loyal pack cannot survive impossible odds through faith alone. Magdalena turned her helmet toward the lupine captain, and even through the armor, her gaze felt like molten metal. Faith moves mountains, Xenos, and we don't need to survive. We just need to kill them all first. The silence stretched until Commander Thax spoke carefully. Perhaps we should examine alternative approaches. The Coalition has developed new quantum disruption weapons that won't work. Rodriguez cut him off. Tried those on Cadia. Devourers adapted in 6 hours. Started incorporating the quantum fields into their carapaces. Then improved shield generators, enhanced armor systems. They eat metal too, Magdalena added, helpfully, quite efficiently. Elder Thythara's wings fluttered with frustrated confusion. Then how exactly do you propose to defeat an enemy that adapts to every weapon, consumes all matter, and reproduces exponentially? Rodriguez and Magdalena exchanged what might have been playful grins behind their helmets. Simple, Rodriguez said. We hit them so hard and so fast, they don't have time to adapt. With what weapons? General Vex demanded. Magdalena hefted her flamer. Righteous fury! Rodriguez patted his chainsword. Comparial steel. They spoke in unison. And the Emperor's blessing. The alien stared at them for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Helix spoke with the careful precision of someone addressing, You plan to defeat a galaxy-consuming threat with anger and primitive weapons? And faith, Rodriguez added seriously. Don't forget faith. Captain Zara's military training warred with her pack instincts. Everything about these humans screamed dangerous predator, but they were clearly on the same side. Captain, sister, I've studied human military doctrine. Your species has remarkable tactical innovation. Surely there's more to this plan than frontal assault? Of course there is, Rodriguez nodded. We also bring explosives. Many explosives, Magdalena confirmed. His explosives. General Vex's feline features contorted further. That's still just frontal assault with more firepower. See, but really big firepower, Rodriguez grinned. Melta-charges, crack grenades, phosphex canisters, plasma bombs, virus warheads. Virus warheads are banned by 17 galactic conventions. Commander Thax's tentacles turned, surprised, pale blue with shock. Not on Terra, Magdalena replied calmly. The Emperor's wisdom transcends Xenos laws. Elder Kythara's crystalline form seemed to dim. You humans! You actually use weapons that destroy entire biospheres? Only when necessary, Rodriguez said reasonably. Can't have heresy spreading to other worlds. Define heresy. Dr. Helix requested, with scientific curiosity masking deeper concern. Anything that opposes the Emperor's will, Magdalena answered immediately, which includes everything not human or serving humans faithfully. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. Captain Zara found her voice first. Sister, with respect, that definition encompasses most of the galaxy. See? Rodriguez nodded agreeably. Big galaxy, lots of work to do. Commander Thax's tentacles twisted in patterns that indicated severe stress. Captain, surely you don't mean... A thunderous roar echoed through the station's hull, cutting off the conversation. Emergency lights began flashing as klaxons wailed. All heads turned toward the viewports where space itself seemed to be tearing apart in violent purple-black wounds. Warp rifts, Magdalena observed calmly. The Devourers are bringing friends. Through the growing tears in reality, shapes began emerging. Not the insectoid bioships of the Devourers, but something far worse. Vessels of impossible geometry that hurt to look at directly, crackling with energies that made the station's shields scream warnings. Chaos forces, Rodriguez identified grimly. Should have expected this. The Great Devourer and the Ruinous Powers love working together. General Vex's claws extended involuntarily. Working together? How is that possible? The Devourers consume everything. Chaos corrupts everything, Magdalena finished. Including Devourers. Now we face an enemy that adapts, devours, and corrupts reality itself. The assembled aliens stared in horror at the nightmare fleet emerging from the warp. Ships that defied physics, creatures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and behind them all, the endless swarm of evolved devourer bioships now pulsing with chaotic energies. This changes everything, Elder Kythara whispered. We need to evacuate the sector. Full retreat to... No, Rodriguez stood, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. No retreat. No surrender. Captain, be reasonable, Commander Thax pleaded. This force could consume half the galaxy. Then we stop them here. Magdalena's flamer ignited with a soft whoosh. The Emperor's light will burn them all. Dr. Helix's cold reptilian logic struggled with the human response. You cannot defeat this with weapons and faith alone. The mathematics are impossible. The Emperor protects, both humans said simultaneously, their voices carrying absolute conviction that somehow made the impossible sound inevitable. As if summoned by their faith, the station's communication array crackled to life. A new voice, speaking in the same language but with different cadence, filled the chamber. Hopeful. This is Brother Sergeant Marcus of the Iron Hands chapter. We received your Voxcast, Captain. The Third Company is inbound with full battle honors. Rodriguez's armor Vox carried happy satisfaction. How long until arrival, Sergeant? 6 hours, Captain. We'll come in fast and loud, just how the Emperor likes it. The aliens looked between the speakers in growing disbelief. Captain Zara spoke first. More of you are coming? A full company, Rodriguez confirmed. 100 Space Marines, plus armor support and orbital assets. 100 soldiers against a fleet that size? General Vex's voice cracked, nervous, slightly. 100 Astartes, Magdalena corrected. There's a difference. Through the viewports, the enemy fleet continued growing, reality bending and twisting around their unholy presence. Yet somehow, impossibly, the two humans seemed more relaxed than concerned. The communication array crackled again. Captain Rodriguez, this is Tech Priest Dominus Zareth. The Omnisia's blessing flows through our weapons. We come bearing gifts of sacred ammunition and the machine god's wrath. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Mechanicus support too. The Emperor provides. Elder Kythara's voice rose to a pitch that could shatter crystal. You're actually planning to fight that armada with 100 soldiers and religious fanatics? Both humans turned toward her with expressions hidden behind their helmets, but their body language conveyed something between amusement and pity. Hermana, Rodriguez said gently. Sirius, you still don't understand what humans are, do you? Before anyone could respond, space erupted in new violence as the chaos-corrupted Devourer fleet opened fire on the system's outer defenses. The Kronar assault cruiser lurched violently as another plasma volley tore through its starboard hull. Ambassador Velkesh gripped the command throne's armrest, his leonine features twisted in barely controlled panic. The massive feline's golden mane bristled as he watched his people's fleet crumble before the relentless Sethkar advance. "My lord," First Navigator Thalmor's voice cracked through the ship's internal comm. "We've lost the Sunward Pride and the Stellar Hunter. The Serpent ships are adapting to our weapons faster than we can modify targeting parameters." Velkesh's amber eyes tracked the tactical display. 43 Kronar vessels had entered this system 6 hours ago, confident in their military superiority. Now, only 12 remained, and those barely functional. The Sethkar reptilians had somehow anticipated every tactical doctrine, every formation, every weapon frequency the Kronar possessed. "How many evacuation pods have launched?" he asked his communications officer. 67,000 civilian pods, Ambassador. "But the Serpents are hunting them systematically. They're not taking prisoners. They're consuming the biomass." The bridge shuttered again. Through the viewports, Velkesh could see the distinctive angular silhouettes of Sethkar dreadnoughts methodically dismantling his fleet. Their bioadaptive hulls shifted color and configuration like living tissue, making targeting nearly impossible. "Sir!" The sensor operator's ears flattened against her skull. "Unknown contacts dropping out of warp. Multiple signatures bearing 27 Mark IV." Velkesh's enhanced vision zoomed in on the newcomers. The ships were unlike anything in his database. Massive, cathedral-like structures bristling with weapons and adorned with skull motifs and golden eagles. Their hulls bore the scars of countless battles, yet they moved with predatory grace. "Open communications to the unknown vessels," he ordered. "Full spectrum broadcast." Static filled the bridge before a deep, resonant voice responded. The translator struggled with the alien language structure before settling on an approximation. "Attention, Xenos vessels. You are in Imperial space. Identify yourselves or be destroyed." Imperial space? Velkesh exchanged glances with his crew. "This is Kronar territory. We are under attack by Sethkar forces and request immediate assistance. I am Ambassador Velkesh of the Kronar Alliance." A pause. Then, "Kronar, Xenos, Sethkar, also Xenos. Captain Mordrak of the Ultramarines 3rd Company will determine your fate based on threat assessment. Stand down and prepare for boarding." The communication cut. Velkesh watched in fascination as the Imperial ships moved into attack formation. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and utterly fearless as they approached the superior Sethkar fleet. "Ambassador," his tactical officer whispered. "Those newcomers are outnumbered 4-1. The Serpents will adapt to their weapon systems within minutes. They're committing suicide." The first Imperial vessel, a massive battle barge nearly twice the size of Velkesh's flagship, opened fire. But these weren't the clean energy weapons of Kronar technology or the bioadaptive plasma of the Sethkar. These were crude, brutal projectile weapons that hurled building-sized shells across the void. The shells punched through Sethkar adaptive shields like they weren't there. "Impossible," breathed the sensor operator. "Their weapons are primitive, basic kinetic projectiles. How are they penetrating adaptive shielding?" More Imperial ships joined the bombardment. The humans, for the database had finally identified their species, were using tactics that defied all conventional wisdom. Instead of maintaining formation and seeking optimal firing positions, they were charging directly at the enemy fleet, guns blazing. A Sethkar cruiser that had been systematically dismantling Kronar vessels suddenly found itself bracketed by 3 Imperial destroyers. The reptilian ship's hull began shifting to adapt to the projectile impacts, but the humans simply switched ammunition types. Explosive shells gave way to armor-piercing penetrators, which in turn were replaced by some form of incendiary round that seemed to burn even in vacuum. "They're not giving the adaptive systems time to compensate," Velkesh realized. "But that's insane. It requires perfect coordination and split-second timing across multiple vessels." The lead Imperial ship was now close enough for visual contact. Through his viewports, Velkesh could see its hull in detail. Gothic architecture twisted into a weapon of war, adorned with religious iconography and battle honors. Massive gun batteries tracked targets with mechanical precision, while smaller weapons stitched lines of fire across space. Then, the surprised boarding pods launched. "What are those humans doing?" Thelmore's voice was tight with disbelief. "Are those assault pods? They're launching direct boarding attacks on ships engaged in active combat?" Velkesh watched in stunned silence as dozens of armored pods shot from the Imperial vessels like bullets. They struck Sethkar hulls and burned through armor plating with cutting torches. The reptilian ships began evasive maneuvers, but the pods kept coming, targeting specific sections with surgical precision. "Sir," the communications officer's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm detecting combat vox chatter from inside the Sethkar ships. The humans are fighting aboard enemy vessels while the fleet engagement continues." The tactical display began showing impossible readings. 3 Sethkar cruisers that had been moments away from firing solutions on Kronar ships suddenly went dark. Their weapons fell silent, their engines died, and their hulls began venting atmosphere. "How?" desperate Velkesh demanded. "How are they neutralizing ships that fast?" His answer came in the form of an Imperial Vox broadcast, likely intended for human forces, but powerful enough to reach the Kronar ship. "Boarding Team Alpha. This is Sergeant Castor. Reactor secured. Initiating overload sequence. All units, evacuation in 90 seconds. "They're setting the reactors to explode," the tactical officer said in amazement. "They board enemy ships mid-battle, fight their way to engineering, and destroy the vessel from within. Then they evacuate and do it again." A Sethkar dreadnought, the flagship of the reptilian force, began targeting the lead Imperial ship with its primary weapons. The bioadaptive plasma cannons, designed to overcome any defense, lanced out in brilliant green streams. The Imperial ship's shields flared and collapsed. Plasma carved deep gouges in its armored hull. Any sane commander would have withdrawn, sought cover, attempted evasive maneuvers. Instead, the human vessel accelerated directly toward the dreadnought. "Ramming speed," Velkesh breathed. "They're going to ram a ship 3 times their size." But the humans weren't finished surprising him. At the last possible moment, the Imperial ship rolled 90 degrees and fired every weapon it possessed into the dreadnought's exposed flank. The bombardment lasted only seconds before the ships passed each other, but those seconds were devastating. The Sethkar flagship's adaptive hull couldn't compensate for the sheer volume of fire delivered at point-blank range. Armor plating shattered, internal systems exploded, and secondary fires began consuming the ship from within. "Impossible," the sensor operator stammered. "The mathematical probability of surviving that maneuver is—" "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Mordrak of the Ultramarines. Your combat performance suggests competence. You will surrender your vessel for inspection or be destroyed as a potential threat. You have 60 seconds to comply." Velkesh looked around his bridge. His crew, elite Kronar warriors with centuries of combat experience, stared at the tactical displays in shell-shocked silence. In less than 20 minutes, these humans had accomplished what the entire Kronar alliance had failed to do in 6 months of warfare. "Ambassador," Thalmor whispered, "what do we do?" Through the viewports, Velkesh could see the humans continuing their impossible assault. More Sethkar ships were going dark as boarding parties completed their work. The reptilian formation, which had seemed invincible moments before, was collapsing under the weight of human audacity. "We comply," he said finally. "Lower shields and prepare for boarding. And remember, whatever these humans are, they just saved our species from extinction. Show them the respect they've earned." The docking clamps engaged with mechanical precision, and Velkesh felt the vibration through his ship's hull as the human boarding craft attached. He straightened his ceremonial robes and tried to project the dignity befitting a Kronar ambassador, despite the lingering taste of fear in his mouth. The airlock cycled, and the humans entered his ship. Nothing in Velkesh's experience had prepared him for the sight of a space marine in full battle armor. The figure that stepped through the airlock stood nearly 3 meters tall, encased in ceramite plates painted in ultramarine blue. The armor's surface was covered in battle damage that had been carefully repaired rather than replaced, each scar a testament to survival against impossible odds. But it was the helmet that truly unsettled him. The skull-faced visor regarded him with emotionless certainty, while purity seals fluttered in the recycled air. This wasn't just a soldier. It was a walking monument to warfare itself. Captain Mordrak removed his helmet, revealing a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His features were sharp, angular, and utterly without warmth. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am Captain Mordrak of the Ultramarines' 3rd Company. You will explain your presence in Imperial space and your conflict with the Serpent Xenos." The plasma cannon's dying whine echoed through the command center as Admiral Kethvar watched the final defense screen flicker out. The Hive Fleet's bioship stretched across the void like a plague of locusts, blotting out the stars themselves. 3 billion Zephyrian souls on the colony worlds below, and he had failed them all. "Sir," Communications Officer Yeth whispered, her crystalline voice cracking. "Hopeful, incoming transmission from the human vessel." Kethvar's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display. The single Imperial cruiser hung motionless between his dying fleet and the oncoming swarm, its Gothic architecture seeming almost quaint against the organic horror approaching. 1 ship? Against 1 billion bioforms! Put them through. The Vox crackled, and that strange human voice filled the bridge again. Admiral, this is Chapter Master Valerius of the Iron Templars. We are initiating final protocol. Chapter Master, with respect, you need to retreat. This is not your fight. Our species chose poorly when we allied with your Imperium, and now... Silence. The word cut through the calm like a blade. No ally of the Emperor dies unavenged. We have stood for 10,000 years against worse than this. Today, you will understand why. The transmission cut. Kethvar stared at the human ship, watching as it began to move. Not away from the High Fleet, toward it. They're insane! Navigation Officer Hreth muttered, his insectoid limbs clicking nervously. 1 cruiser against a fleet that consumed the Tau expansion sphere. But something was happening to the human vessel. Its hull began to glow with eldritch fire, runes blazing along its flanks in languages that hurt to perceive. The very space around it seemed to writhe and bend. "What in the void are they doing?" Kethvar breathed. On the bridge of the Eternal Wrath, Chapter Master Valerius knelt before the great altar, his massive power armor scarred by centuries of war. Around him, his battle brothers did the same, their voices rising in perfect unison. "Emperor of mankind, Lord of Terra, Master of the Golden Throne," they chanted. "We offer ourselves as instruments of your will. Let our deaths purchase victory. Let our sacrifice kindle hope in the darkness." Chief Librarian Maximus felt the warp respond, felt the Emperor's light burning through their souls like molten gold. The psychic scream of the approaching hive mind pressed against his consciousness. But he held firm. He had done this before, on worlds whose names were whispered in legend. "The ritual is complete, Chapter Master," he reported. "The ship's machine spirit is ready." Valerius rose, his storm bolter loaded with sanctified rounds. "Then let us show these Xenos what it means to face the angels of death." The Eternal Wrath accelerated, its engines pushing far beyond safe parameters. But it wasn't heading for the High Fleet's main body. It was driving straight for the largest bioship, a living vessel the size of a moon that pulsed with synaptic control nodes. On the Zephyrian flagship, Kethvar watched in fearful horror and fascination as the human ship plunged into the enemy formation. Hive ships the size of continents turned to converge on the tiny cruiser, their bioweapons lighting space with deadly spores and acid streams. The Imperial vessel's void shields flared and died. Its armor began to melt under concentrated fire, but it kept coming. "Emperor, preserve us!" Valerius growled as his ship shuddered under impact. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space, but the Astartes fought on in vacuum, their power armor sealing automatically. "All brothers, prepare for boarding actions." The Eternal Wrath's prow smashed into the hive ship's flesh hull, its armored beak designed for exactly this purpose. Kilometers of living tissue parted before blessed adamantium, and the cruiser drove deep into the creature's core. "Now!" Valerius roared. Throughout the ship, Space Marines activated their teleportation beacons. In flashes of golden light, entire squads materialized within the bioship's nervous system, their bolters roaring as they cut through chitinous corridors toward the creature's brainstem. Brother Sergeant Castor led his tactical squad through a passage lined with pulsing synaptic tissue. The walls themselves screamed as his chainsword bit deep, but he felt no pity. Only righteous fury. "For the Emperor!" his battle brothers chanted, their voices echoing strangely in the organic tunnels. Lasfire from cultist creatures sparked off their armor as they advanced, step by inexorable step. Behind them, the Eternal Wrath's reactors began to overload. On the Zephyrian bridge, proximity sensors screamed warnings as more hive ships closed in. But something was wrong with the massive biovessel. Its movements had become erratic, its weapon fire unfocused. "What are they doing to it?" Tactical Officer Krex whispered. Deep within the bioship, Chapter Master Valerius stood before a pillar of neural tissue that stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with the electric thoughts of 1 billion lesser creatures. This was the synaptic relay that coordinated the entire local swarm. His power fist, blessed by the chaplains of his chapter, crackled with disruption fields specifically designed to sever psychic connections. Around him, his remaining battle brothers formed a protective circle, their bolters cutting down waves of warrior forms that threw themselves at the intruders with suicidal desperation. 10,000 years, Xenos! Valerius snarled, raising his fist. 10,000 years we have held the line. Today you learn why humanity endures. He drove his fist into the neural pillar. The psychic backlash was instantaneous. The hive mind scream tore through local space like a tsunami of fearful, pure anguish. And every bioship in the fleet convulsed as their coordination network collapsed. Ships collided with each other, their pilots suddenly deaf and blind to their swarm brothers. But the effort was killing Valerius. Blood ran from his eyes as the alien intelligence tried to overwhelm his mind with its death rage. His armor's systems sparked and failed as psychic feedback overloaded them. "Chapter Master, the reactor will breach in 30 seconds!" Brother Maximus appeared at his side, the librarian's force sword blazing with protective wards. Valerius smiled, his scarred face peaceful, even as his life ebbed away. "Then we die as we lived, brother, in service to him." The Eternal Wrath's reactor core achieved critical mass. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away, a new star born and dying in the span of seconds. The massive bioship simply ceased to exist, vaporized by forces that briefly rivaled the output of a stellar furnace. But it was not just destruction. It was hopeful transformation. The Emperor's light, channeled through the willing sacrifice of his angels, spread outward in waves that mortal eyes could not perceive. Where it touched the remaining bioships, their hive-mind connections withered and died. Suddenly cut off from the Gestalt consciousness that gave them purpose, the creatures began to turn on each other in fearful confusion and terror. Admiral Kethvar watched in surprised, stunned silence as the unstoppable hive fleet tore itself apart. Ships that had acted with perfect coordination moments before now fired blindly into their own formations. The disciplined advance became a chaotic rout as billions of creatures, suddenly aware of their own mortality for the first time, fled in every direction. "Impossible," he whispered. "The tactical projections showed..." "Sir!" Communications Officer Yeth's voice was filled with happy. "Incoming transmission from the surface. It's the human survivors." The main screen flickered to life, showing a scene that defied belief. In the ruins of Zephyros Prime's capital city, a single figure in power armor knelt among the wreckage of a drop pod. Brother Captain Darius of the Iron Templars' Third Company, somehow thrown clear in the explosion's aftermath, raised his bloodied face to the sky. "The Emperor protects," he said simply, his words carrying across the void with impossible clarity. Behind him, Zephyrian civilians began to emerge from their shelters, staring at the retreating bioships with expressions of pure disbelief. In the days that followed, as rescue ships arrived and the full scope of the victory became clear, the Zephyrian Confederation's understanding of their human allies underwent a fundamental shift. The species they had dismissed as primitive fanatics had achieved something that their most advanced tactical computers had deemed impossible. Admiral Kethvar found himself standing before a makeshift shrine the survivors had erected to Chapter Master Valerius. The human's helmet sat atop a pile of Xenos bones, surrounded by flickering candles and crude offerings. "I don't understand," he admitted to Brother Captain Darius, who stood beside him on borrowed legs, his own having been lost in the bioship's destruction. "Our species has studied warfare for millennia. We had every advantage except numbers. How did you succeed where we failed?" Darius was silent for a long moment, watching Zephyrian children place flowers at the shrine's base. When he spoke, his voice held the weight of 10,000 years of history. "You fought to survive, Admiral. We fought to die well." The distinction, Kethvar realized, serious, made all the difference. As news of the victory spread across the galaxy, it carried with it a simple truth that every xenospecies had learned to accept. When death itself became a weapon, when sacrifice became strategy, when faith became physics, humanity didn't just survive, they thrived. And in the grim darkness of the far future, that was the most human thing of all. The Emperor protects.